Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast, one-stop shop for everyone feeling stuck in their career and who are looking to identify, change, and succeed at their new fulfilling work. I'm your host, Dilma Oseita. Let's go. Hi all, how are you doing? I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for asking. I was thinking the other day how often I seem to start the episodes talking about the weather. I suppose all those years living in England did leave a mark on me, so today I will not be mentioning anything weather related, or at least I try to. So today I have another Career Changer Series interview for you, and my guest is Lois Letchford, who switched her career around, and she went from teaching physical education and then being a stay-at-home mom to her kids and a trailing spouse to becoming a sought-after reading specialist and literacy problem solver. I'm so very pleased to feature her, as I believe that her career change story is a little unusual. On this podcast, you and I chat a lot about intention and direction. We speak about how to gain clarity for your next career move, how to ensure that next career you choose is the right fit. But what do you do when life throws challenges your way, when it seems like you virtually have no say, no choice into what path to take? Do you resist and deny the hardships, cursing the skies, asking why me? Or do you ride that wave, trusting that you will be taken exactly where you have to be? How do you keep faith that you are in the process of arriving at your purpose and mission in life? Lois's story that you'll hear in a few short moments is unusual in the sense that her career change was not necessarily voluntary or intentional, at least to start with. I believe that she is the perfect example of someone who managed to stay open and embrace the change by simply following the breadcrumbs and refusing to give up. Lois and I were laughing that in a way she's the perfect example of someone who had received a basket full of lemons and managed to make some badass lemonade out of them. She went from living her life as an undiagnosed dyslexic and having to essentially from the scratch create principles and unique techniques to help her son, who also is a dyslexic, learn how to read. The same son, by the way, who was essentially branded by one of his teachers as one of the worst students she's seen in years, low IQ and incapable to read. The same son who later went on and got his Ph.D. from Oxford University in England. A mother who didn't give up now has laid the foundations and inspired hope in thousands, if not millions to come, of mothers and kids who do not own a neurotypical brain and may have reading difficulties. Lois, who by the way, like I said, is a dyslexic and has lived a portion of her life being undiagnosed, has also written a book called Reverse Memoir, which documents her story with Nicholas, her son. She also has a podcast, When Learning is Trauma, and, wait for it, with a few collaborators, she has even published an academic paper, something that she did not even think was remotely possible for her as a dyslexic. And I have a feeling, in many ways, she's just getting started. I think Lois is the modern day warrior, and I really hope that you will love the story just as much as I did. As you listen to the episode, I also invite you to look at the challenges that you faced in your life or maybe are currently facing. Is there any way that this very challenge that seems so huge and so heavy could at the same time be your personal opportunity to grow, to evolve, and perhaps even find your very own meaning in life and your career? So without further ado, here's the interview. Enjoy. Okay, so Lois, could you maybe just briefly introduce yourself to the listeners?
I would love to. I am Lois Letchford. I'm the author of the book Reverse to Memoir, and I consider myself a literacy problem solver. And I'm also the CEO of a reading program called Teaching Students with Dyslexia. Unknown to me, I grew up as an undiagnosed dyslexic.
Oh, wow.
That's the start of my career. But I still survived school enough to become a teacher, a physical education teacher. That was many years ago now. And since then, my world has changed dramatically.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we're gonna sort of dive into deeper on this podcast as well. As you know, in here we talk all about career change and how people in different ways find themselves at crossroads and decide to sort of seek for something that would give them fulfillment and meaning. So maybe we can move into talking about your career change. And we already had a little chat before, and when you shared your story, what sort of I found fascinating is that to some extent your career change was involuntary, right? So can you share a little bit about how your story unfolded and how did you make a decision to go into teaching? And I guess you'll share all the details. So I don't want to, get ahead of you and your story.
My career change was involuntary.
Yeah.
As I said, I struggled through school. I was this undiagnosed dyslexic. And I thought after I'd been teaching for a while, I'd been to school. I went through another school and now I'm back in a school. Life's got to be more than just going to school. So I went to London. And while I was there, I went on a bus trip and I heard this Australian voice behind me, Australian male. And I thought, I've got to talk to him. And he said that he was on a scholarship to London and working for an engineering company. And I knew Australian, scholarship, you've got to be super smart. We ended up marrying. And with that, he actually went on to do his PhD at Oxford. So that's my first change, that I followed him to do his PhD. When someone's been offered a PhD, you could say no, but I believed in my husband and his work. So I followed him. And then you have these children. And you think they should be all right. And the first one he's so fast at everything. The second one comes along and he goes to school and fails dramatically. And when you're put at that crossroads, it's just a nightmare because school only offers school and you believe them. So he failed first grade in 1994. And then in 1995, my husband has a study leave and we have 6 months in Oxford. And I thought, I'm going to take Nicholas on because he was so terrified of everything. And he was slow and he worried about things and you could see that. So I started to teach him and I start with these books called Success for All. And they were an abject failure. And I'm no better than his first grade teacher. My mother-in-law is with me and she said, Lois, put away what's not working and make learning fun. Perfect. And that's what I did. I had to stop, think, what can I do to make this fun and have him learn? And what I did was I thought he can rhyme words and see patterns. I'll write little poems. And the little poems were transformative because Nicholas loved them. I didn't expect him to do any reading or writing. I did it all. And it changed our classroom. And the poetry built up a life all of its own. And that in itself, creating a classroom where he was happy and learning, was transformative. We returned to Australia. Nicholas has had this phenomenal experience. I'm excited about all that we did. And I meet the school diagnostician who'd done the testing, the years before, and she said he had no strengths and low IQ and everything. And I said to her, Nicholas had such a wonderful time in the UK. And he's learnt so much and he can do all these things. And she stood there, put her hands on her hips and said, well, he's the worst child I've seen in 20 years of teaching. And I still struggle to say that without bitterness.
I can imagine.
But her words really then pushed me because I went home. I can't say anything, but I went back home, thought about it, and then went back to school and said, well, if he is the worst child you've seen in 20 years of teaching, We have to change how we teach. Don't expect him to learn like everybody else. And really, that was the transformational moment for me. And it caused me, and I've got 3 boys at home. They're starting to go to school. My time is now free up. What do I want to do? Well, I've just had this enormous experience. I want to use it. And so I went back to school and I did studies to become a reading specialist. And when I'm doing my reading, I'm seeing everything that I did for Nicholas. I saw how it worked in the literature. And that was another peg of saying, hey, this is fantastic. What you do is worthwhile. And that really made the difference.
I love this story. I wonder at that point when sort of, that conversation that you had was pretty pivotal. And it's even hard for me to hear that someone would say that to a parent, right? Like it just causes a lot of emotion. So when you were at those crossroads and you were making the decision that you need to continue your studies in this area, you would like to continue working there and help other people. Was it a hard decision, or because the way you describe the story, it feels like you were taking places and you just went with it, right? Because I know a lot of people would have so much inner drama and pros and cons and lists and talking to everyone around them. What was that process like for you?
It was a drive. Her words gave me a drive. You're right. My friend read my book and she said, Lois, I remember that total anxiety you had in Oxford and all during that time. And it comes across as it's too easy. I was incredibly anxious because I saw these 2 things. I saw Nicholas having this huge growth in learning, but this growth in reading was like in millimeters. And you can't see the future when the child is 7 or 8, but you have to, they must learn to read. So there was that conflict there. But even at that stage, I could see the way I taught him was transformative. And that's what drove me along with everything else. And the other component is if he had stayed in school, you're dependent on the teachers. Nicholas's classroom teachers were brilliant. His reading teacher was not up to the task. I didn't know that at the time, but I knew I had to keep an eye on everything. And people have said to me, I'm surprised you didn't get in a fight with the school. I didn't get in a fight with the school because I worked alongside them. And I said, these are the solutions you need. As a parent, I'm telling the reading teacher, this is what has to happen. And it was so much fun. It was so engaging. It was totally different to what other people do. I became passionate about teaching reading because people have fixed ideas on the process. Why do I keep fighting? Because the industry is not adequate. The industry is not providing the results it needs for these young children. That's why I keep going. And that started right there, right back in 1995.
What I'm hearing is that, you were obviously, because this situation happened in your family and you were very much affected by it as your son, I would probably be the same, probably even worse. Probably would have fought with every single teacher who said something bad about my son and been banned from all the schools in the region. So I get it, right? I get it. I think you were quite posed from what you're telling me about this whole issue. But what I'm curious is about that moment, because it was your son's story, but where did it become your story? You could have stopped after, Nicholas succeeded and he became much better, as you shared with me, which you shared with me previously, right? That he did amazing and graduated. And I guess you'll probably share a little bit more about that as well. How and why did it remain your purpose and your mission?
In 1999, our family moved from Brisbane, Australia to Lubbock, Texas. Nicholas is 11. I must have been in my early 40s. So my husband's working. I've got 3 children in school. What do you do? And, today you need 2 incomes. What do I do? How can I support my family? And I'm new in the area and I meet a mother whose 13-year-old son has spent 4 years in the phonics only reading program. He came out non-reading. The school district paid for me to work with him over the summer, and I taught him to read over the period of 10 weeks, something that hadn't happened in 4 years. At the end of the summer, the mother writes a letter to the school district and said, "You employ this woman or I sue you." I got employed. That's when it became my story. You'll see, I'm seeing children who failed and failed and failed and failed, and I'm seeing my son succeed. And he went to school with no support and coped. The other component of that, Nicholas is 11 when we went to Lubbock. The time in Lubbock transformed Nicholas's life. Nicholas went from being a below average student to the top of the class. And a lot of that had to do with expectation. So while I'm teaching reading, Nicholas is growing and growing and growing, and I'm seeing all the steps that have to happen for a kid who's behind to go to the top. So that's when it really became my story. And I could also see the alternative. What could have happened to Nicholas if we'd not had this extreme privilege? I'd have nightmares about that. And it did impact my sleep. It impacted my life, when I'm teaching in Lubbock, because I'm thinking, how can we put children in a school and fail them? And I'd go to bed at night and my mind would just go wild. And that's stress and trauma that was happening to me, not because of my son, but because of my students.
So I wonder, when you started this journey, when the whole Nicholas journey started, you started teaching him and looking for ways how to support him and help him. Did you ever even envisioned or thought that this could become something that you do almost essentially full time?
After the diagnostician said he's the worst child I've seen in 20 years of teaching, within a few months of that, I could see Nicholas started to read independently because of all the work we had done. And I thought, she's going to regret saying that one day. I thought, I don't know what's going to happen to Nicholas, but because she said that, she's given me a starting point for something else. And that's embedded in my brain, that someone said that. And when someone gives you such a terrible diagnosis, they're totally wrong. It just gives you fuel to keep going. And really, that's what it did.
So without sort of going maybe too much into detail, but maybe you could share your experience of teaching Nicholas and other students who essentially fall behind, and maybe you could share some of the biggest takeaways that you found.
Your question is fascinating about what do I recommend, because everyone you'll go to about reading will say it's about the teaching of letters and sounds, and they can't do that. I actually take a step back and back and back. It goes way deeper than that. And the very first thing we have to do is create an environment where children can learn happily. And when children come to us and they are stressed and they are not happy with what that we are teaching, or they don't get it, we have added more stress to their life. So before you start anything, we have to get a base where the kids can say, this is okay, I can do this. And then from there, you can start to work out how to teach. So much of teaching reading comes from preconceived ideas about what has to be done and how it has to be done. You have to teach this method or this method. If the child doesn't get it, what we are teaching, we've lost them. And that's how I've been able to make a career out of teaching the most vulnerable children. My most damaged children were 16 years old after spending every day in school for 9 years, 10 years, and came to me and they couldn't read 10 words. I have to say to them, this space is okay. You're welcome here, and I'm changing things so that you can get it. And you have to build that safety net and the confidence that what I'm doing is okay for you, and never putting you down, never saying, oh, God, haven't you got this yet? When they haven't got it, what else do I have to do to help them get it? That's really the big thing. So you won't hear me say you have to teach this method or that method, but first up, we have to create a safe space where my students are happy.
Yeah, exactly. That makes perfect sense. And I can really relate to your method. It's almost like going back to the basics, like rewinding a little bit before sort of looking at the diagnosis and telling like, well, you cannot read, and if you cannot read, you're this or that, right? And attaching a meaning, right, which we then take on is because as we're young, because it starts very early on, we don't have the tools, we don't have the mindset that we have as adults to deal and process what we're being told. So we take it as truth and we internalize, right?
Exactly.
So
Children don't have the language to even say, what you are doing makes no sense to me.
yeah.
And that's a problem because all they have is body language and behavior. And that's what we have to take on board really seriously. And then you get into the next problem that teachers are often put in a situation where they've got 1 to 10 children. It becomes crowd control. So it's multi-layered, this teaching of reading.
Totally. I can see, and I think we spoke about that before when we were chatting, that it's more like it's a systematic issue, and right, and solving it is not going to be one-dimensional either, right? It's probably going to be different efforts from different social groups and so on and so forth. But hopefully that change is happening sometime soon. But what I wanted to say that I really relate to your method, kind of going back, is because that's what I do with people who come to me and want some support with career change. A lot of the times when they seek that support, they would go to recruiters or someone in that field, and they would just look at their skills and they would say, well, based on your experience and your skill set, this is where you'll fit. Completely ignoring what they are about, what they want, what their inspirations, value system, all of that, which I feel like I do when they come to me. I go like, I don't care about your resume. I don't. For now, just drop it aside. I want to know about you, what you're about, and what would the best match would be in terms of a career, business, on and so forth, right? So we take that individual and we treat it as one. And I guess that's a similar message of yours. See them for who they are. Do not label, honor them.
You're seeing a wider path. You're not just seeing this narrow thing, and you're getting them to explore and think about, what do I want to do, as opposed to where do I fit?
So going back to sort of you and your journey, and you already mentioned that one of the things I did want to ask you and maybe expand about is that you seem to have quite a lot of, tenacity and determination and energy, right? And what your situation ended up fueling you. And we were joking that essentially life gave you lemons and you made lemonade. And I feel like a lot of other people could have already given up because essentially it's a big fight you're fighting, right? You're fighting the system. So what is that secret sauce? What do you think you do differently that you've seen some return on investment on your efforts that you already made?
It's knowing that if I had not had the set of circumstances to help my son succeed, he could have been a basket case or suicidal or anything else that keeps me going. No child should have to be privileged to learn to read. And my son was not privileged. He was extremely privileged. So that's why I keep going. That's what drives me. And occasionally I get some really good vibes, we're not really good vibes, but really good clients. I get parents coming to me and saying, what do I do? And that's why I've started the teaching students with dyslexia. I didn't think I could ever write a reading program because I wanted to be so individual. But I met this man who's also dyslexic, and he only learned to read when he was in his 20s. And he takes it from a writing point of view. And between the two of us, now we've got something that is embracing for many students. You can't ever say all, but certainly for many. And that's been exciting for me to see that and to watch the growth and to see children engaged in reading. So I think you just have to keep going. What else would I do? What else would I do?
There are so many things you could do, right? That's why I'm asking you, how did you end up where did you find that commitment, right? Because I feel like if you asked me, like, I feel like my work is my purpose. So I could not do that. If you asked me, I would do it for free. Listen, if you told me coaching is forbidden, it's banned for life, forever, from every country, I would be like, I would still find a way to support people because I cannot not do that. It's so deeply ingrained in me, right? And yeah, go on.
What happened? Okay. We were in Lubbock, Texas from 1999 to 2007. Nicholas graduated in the top 20% of his class, doing physics, chemistry, biology, calculus, you name it, he did it. Then we moved to Tasmania, Australia, with my husband's work. That lasted a few years. And then in 2011, he took a job in upstate New York. So I'm following my husband. I'm a trailing spouse. In 2012, Nicholas graduates with 2 honours degrees, one in mathematics and one in engineering. His story's getting better and better and better. In 2013, Nicholas is on a flight to London because he has a scholarship to do a Ph.D. in the Department of Applied Mathematics at Oxford University. I'm up here in upstate New York, and I've watched this long-term case study of my son go from nothing, he's never going to do anything, to PhD Oxford. I'm here, brand new in the city. My children have flown the nest. What do I do? And I thought I wanted to write Nicholas's story up, but I can't write. I'm dyslexic. I've never written. And when I write, everyone has to edit. So I did my master's degree. So that was really getting me back into the academics again, which was fantastic. Gave me another view. That was wonderful. And I finished that. And that's when a friend, what would you like? I really want to tell Nicholas's story. And so I wrote. I had a bit of support. It wasn't enough. And the next thing I did was I went to a writing class. I can't teach in this state. That was another door closed. And I went to a writing class, met this young girl, my son's age, and she said, I'll help you write your story. She worked with me for a whole year to get something that resembled a book that was readable and exciting. And a lady said to me yesterday, Lois, I couldn't put it down. Where are you going? What will you do now? And that's really the journey. And as I'm writing, I'm seeing not only Nicholas's story, but my story in my book. And once you've written a book, then you've got to sell it. And that's now a whole new world for me of marketing. Makes me panic.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's really the driver. That's what's kept me going. I mean, the strength of Nicholas's story, really, Nicholas's story is equivalent to Helen Keller, modern day Helen Keller. But people don't see it like that. But it is.
I love that. And I'm still in awe of your sort of tenacity and determination, because I still think working with clients every day, I know how sometimes, especially knowing your background and what sort of inner dialogue you might have, being so determined and not allowing those inner gremlins to eat you up and continuing and persisting with what you do. So one of the things you said that, what do? You just keep on going, right? I wonder if you have any other advice that maybe you can share with the listeners who also face challenging, unfavorable circumstances. And I wonder if you could maybe share your take on how could you see the challenge as an opportunity. But because I'm a believer that after some time, when you process what's happening to you, you can really see every single challenge as an opportunity to grow and expand and evolve.
You said the words, the inner gremlins. I was with my sister one day and something happened and I said, well, I'm stupid. And she said to me, Lois, why do you say that? Because that's the narrative that I have had throughout my life. And it's a matter of addressing that and changing the narrative. So I listen to podcasts. I work on my mindset. When I do hear that negative voice, I'm learning now to say that is not right. Change it. You can do ... And so the important thing for me is to fill your mind with positives. And we do have to address what's happened in the past and unpack it and repackage it, to say the positives and talk about how this is going to work now.
Totally. And, I'm so glad that you're doing this work now, right? Because a lot of people may use age or whatever as like, oh, my mom says, I'm trying to teach her English. She goes, I'm too old to learn this. Who learns a language in their late 60s? I'm like, well, many people do, right?
You do.
You do.
My mother learnt to swim. I think it might have been 68, not 58. But my mother learnt to swim then. She learned keyboarding and the computer when my sons were in Lubbock, Texas. My sons taught her keyboarding. She was keen to take on the computer. So, this has been part of my background. And your mother is a role model for her children and her grandchildren. Am I too old to do this? It's really good to put yourself in that position of a learner at that age. And my mother learning the computer at that age has allowed us to travel and to stay in touch with her. My mother was also undiagnosed dyslexic, but she has a drive to keep learning. I will encourage your mother, as hard as it is to learn a language, and I'm in her boat, I don't want to learn another language.
Right. But like that would open up the door for her, right? Like being able to read in English, right? Watch YouTube in English, right? She's very inquisitive, but she's limited to the language.
And the key to learning anything is enjoyment.
Yeah.
If you go to with the impression, you've lost there. If you go with, I can't wait.
Yeah. But you know what? I really think like this state in being curious, right? Even doing the mindset work, that's what I always say. Like if you come in to the mindset work with judgment and shame, like, oh, I fought that thought again. I'm resisting the negative thought. It's not going to work because the first place we need to start with is neutrality and at least curiosity. Be like, oh, wow, interesting. I just thought that I'm stupid. At least starting with there to neutralize the heaviness before we start shifting, because we cannot expect that we will shift the inner dialogue that we had for years and years or years in a couple of exercises after listening to a few podcast episodes, right? It said continuous inner work that we have to do. And I feel like we have so many also what's fascinating to me, I feel like I'm in this world for so many years. I do this work daily and I still find unquestioned beliefs that I just took for granted and I believed and internalized as mine and as true.
You talk about curiosity. I married this man who's phenomenal and he's always been curious. And that was not in my family. But because you're with someone who is like that, it teaches you so much. And then we bought these two books. One is Curiosity by Ian Leslie, and the other is Why by Mario Levio. And they look at brain science and what curiosity does in the brain. And listen to this book. And as I was listening, I just had to stop. Because he said they take, when they do MRIs of the brain and they look at the brain under MRI with curious thoughts and this, that, and the other, he said taking an MRI of the brain is like taking a slice of the ocean. And you think one slice of the ocean tells you everything. And he said we can't do that with the brain. And the words that struck me is that curiosity propagates in the brain in unknown ways. And that's what I did with Nicholas. That's what I do with my students. And once you get into that curiosity mode, you can't measure it through a test.
Yeah, amen to that. Fantastic. Okay, Lois, maybe you could share a little bit more where people can find about you, about your book, if someone is interested. I'm sure there are listeners who have kids who may have reading difficulties, so maybe you can share.
I'm on my website is www.loisletchford.com. I have a number of my resources on there that I use with my students. Funny, use them with your students. My audio book is on there. My Kindle book is on there. Otherwise, my book, Reversed a Memoir, is available on Amazon, as is the audio book. I have a YouTube channel.
Oh, amazing.
On my YouTube channel, I've also done a series titled When Learning is Trauma. And it looks at young people, what happens when children's lives, when they don't learn to read with normal and the impact it has on their lives and what we can do about it. And then I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. I'm sure that is very inspirational for people. I really I'm just fascinated by the fact that you had so much tenacity and determination. And I feel like you're driven by such great energy and purpose to make a dent in this issue and kind of spread the knowledge, spread awareness. I think awareness is the biggest weapon, right? Like awareness. That's what we can do. We cannot force people to do anything, but we can share the awareness. And like you said, like make the brain go poof in a second, right? So if we can do that, that's a huge win, right? And that is what matters. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Vilma. I've loved talking to you. It's been fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like 2021 to be the year when you finally embrace a new career path, make sure you schedule a consultation call with me. I have created a signature holistic career change program that has already helped many of my clients successfully transition into their career of fulfillment. You don't want to miss this. I look forward to connecting with you. Take care.